Right. So, I'm David Gold. I am the patron of Advantage Thinking, and welcome to all of you. This is personally important and generally a very important movement indeed. I'm just going to give a really short and brief history of Advantage Thinking. It all started with Colin for me, and more of him later. He did an amazing, inspirational TED talk many years ago, over a decade ago. And it was clear and to the point, involved very few props other than he ripped off a couple of t-shirts. His simple proposition was to think that all young people it should be seen of in terms of their assets and what they have to offer for a better life, rather than the way the media then and now would have us believe that young people are a burden on society. Indeed, from my point of view, young people are the future of society, so we should invest in them. Colin worked for Foyer full time, and his boss at the time, the sadly departed Jane Slowey, who was the chief exec and was for me one of the most amazing, thoughtful, inspirational, bright people that I've ever had the true privilege to meet and to know. And we all discussed, Colin, Jane, myself, young people as assets. And following many more meetings with others in the sector, Advantage Thinking as a movement was born. It is simply the only way forward. It is the one and only positive way forward, and the way we'll get most out of society. And with that, I hand over to you, Colin.
Thanks very much, David. Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, most people know me. I'm Colin Faulkner. I'm the guy with the hair which looks just as unruly as it does post at the end of the pandemic as it did before. Very much excited to see you all here today. I think this is, before I bash on, I do want to introduce the other co-hosts and facilitators today. It's not just about me. We also have the wonderful Joe Lewis, Chief Executive of the Foyer Federation. Kate Russell is looking after all of the technicals today, Head of Programs and Network at the Federation, the Foyer Federation. And we also have Andy Ward, who is the the Young Person Services Operations Manager at Your Housing Group. And along with Andy, we should also pay our respects to the marketing and comms team at Your Housing Group, who's really helped produce some of the visuals for today. This is an amazing moment, not just because we know we've got people in the room who've come from all around Great Britain, but also across the world. So I'm just going to take a moment to reflect on that. We have people in the room today from Ireland. We have people in the room from France, our friends in the Netherlands, from Groningen and Utrecht. And we can go all the way over to Australia, where even though it's evening, late night in Australia, with a couple of important people in the room who are going to talk today, and reaching all the way to Yokohama in Japan. So, and I think that's very deliberate. Advantage Thinking is a sort of well-accepted idea. And I think what unites us is that shared passion and belief in young people, and that shared sense that we can and should and must do to create a better world with and for young people. So that's what we're going to try to explore today through many sort of 5 key themes are going to come out today. One is about that we're here to celebrate advantage thinking. We're here to celebrate the power of a compelling idea and all the positives that's brought over the last 10 years. So if I had a talent to sing, which unfortunately I don't, I would break into Kool and the Gans and celebrate good times, but I will not go do that for you and destroy the day yet. The second thing we're going to explore is reflecting on the rich learning that we've gained over the last 10 years. So through today, we'll hear from different speakers, such as reflections from Your Housing Group on some of the learning that they've gained over the journey. The third thing we're going to focus on is, of course, inspiration itself, my favorite words. And for the inspiration today, we're going to have some speakers from overseas. We're going to hear more from Australia, in Ireland, later on today, and really sort of reflect on their inspiration, how they've learned from us and inspired us too. And also we'll have later on, we'll have a panel of funders. And we might think that, we might often complain that funders don't always get it, but actually I think we're going to be inspired by hearing the passion behind the funders we've invited today, who do very much support advantage thinking. The fourth thing we're going to focus on today is sharing and social connection. So throughout today's session, we'll have some breakout rooms, a chance to at least touch base and say hello to a few people. And we'd remind you, of course, there's normal etiquette in breakout rooms. Don't forget to turn your mic as you're going into the room, and don't forget to turn it off when you come back out. And we'd encourage you in your breakout rooms to quickly say hello to each other, but to at least allow a bit of time that you can explore one of the advantage thinking themes that we would encourage you to think about. And the fifth thing we want to do today is to really get to focus on power and purpose for and with young people. And that's a key catchphrase of the 4A Federation. So today we'll end up with hearing more about what the 4A Federation are doing to take advantage thinking forwards into the future through their exciting new strategy. So those are the 5 things that hopefully you'll experience over today. To start though, I'm going to introduce a few of my reflections over the last 10 years. And my first reflection is that we wouldn't even be here today talking about this were it not for an invitation I received from someone very special in my life called Avgi from Greece, Thessaloniki. So we're going to start by hearing a little video message from Avgi sharing some of her thoughts. If we could just play that video now.
My name is Avgi, and I'm very happy to join you today as one of the organizers of the original 2011 TEDx event in Thessaloniki. When we invited Colin to speak 10 years ago, we hoped our event would provide a platform for the 4A Federation's work. Our TEDx event theme was "Why Not?" In other words, a focus on things possible to achieve. We believed in Colin, but we had no idea that his time with us would prove so significant to produce the inspiration that has touched so many lives through advantage thinking. Life in Greece has had its challenges over the last decade since that time, but we are resilient and proud people in Thessaloniki, and I see us as advantage thinkers too. So I say to you today, despite Brexit that divides our countries, please continue your work to invest in young people, in advantage thinking. And for young people, we are all united to achieve the possible. Why not?
Thanks very much, Avgi. That's Avgi from the Thessaloniki. I think Avgi should be in the room today, maybe somewhere. One of my abiding memories of the TEDx experience was coming back afterwards and feeling a massive sense of relief that it was all over. But on the airplane flight back, we also got a chance to watch. They were showing the King's speech, and I hadn't really seen that film before. And it suddenly struck me, not that I could in any way compare my TEDx speech with George VI's famous wartime speech, but more specifically that we both shared a common experience, that George VI and myself had both lived as younger people with a stammer that we had to overcome in our lives. And I think for me, it made me realize that the TEDx speech was in many ways, for me, someone finding their voice, and has always reminded me the importance of giving those opportunities to hear people find their voices. And that's why I'm really proud to be a trustee of Sound Delivery Media Charity, who are one of many organizations who are trying to provide those opportunities and spaces, which I know the 4A Federation does too. So that's my first reflection. My second reflection is after that speech, I got many invitations to go and speak in other places around the world. I don't get invited so much anymore. I don't know what it is I'm doing wrong. But the next big speech for me was going to Australia for the first time and talking about advantage thinking in a conference centre just outside Sydney. And that speech had produced a lot of positive reaction afterwards. A lot of people in that room would go away and set up some advantage thinking services, including the first youth foyers in Australia built and designed from an advantage thinking focus, which is really exciting. What I remember most about that particular day were the young people in the audience who rushed forwards in the room to come and speak to me. And it's a true to me that young people have always understood advantage thinking in a way that sometimes us older folks have struggled with at times. Young people seem to intuitively get advantage thinking and excited by the positive energy within it. And the young people who came to me that day asked in a very typical interview sort of question, so Colin, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? Where do you think advantage thinking will be in 10 years' time? I couldn't possibly have said on Zoom, but what I did say was in 10 years' time, I would like to be sitting in the audience, watching young people like you do something much more inspiring on stage than I can. That for me would be the ultimate advantage thinking dream. So 10 years on, I can now realize that I can feel some of that. So today, I'm wearing this wonderful t-shirt, not the orange one that isn't so attractive to walk around London in, but a t-shirt designed by Mctiernan, whose life is very much about expressing advantage thinking, overcoming her own challenges and expressing her talent. And for me, that's so important to be able to wear a t-shirt designed by a young person 10 years on is really symbolic and has power to me. And the second thing I've realized only in the last few weeks really is that the difference 10 years on is that I've now been invited to be the chair of We Belong in January this year. And it suddenly struck me how We Belong are actually like that group of young people, because in We Belong, it's the UK's first youth charity set up and run by young people who are working to help young people from migrant backgrounds who are British in all but paperwork achieve their rights and justice. And I'm in a box seat where I get constantly inspired by watching five staff members who are all young people achieve amazing outcomes that an organisation 5 times the size would struggle to do. And what's the decisive factor is because they bring that youthful advantage thinking and positive energy so important. So for me, that thing about where advantage thinking might be 10 years ago, now I feel that I'm living advantage thinking with We Belong. So for the staff who I know, Kimberly, Chris Allen, and Dami in the room, I hope you know how much I love working with you. And I say that word quite deliberately because love is often seen as a slightly challenging word. There are sometimes people say, oh, Colin's a little bit challenging to work with at times. So I thought my next reflection I wanted to share with you a moment when I was really challenged by advantage thinking on my journey. And this time I was on a trip to Nepal on a holiday for once. And unbeknown, well, I knew someone who was in Kathmandu at the time who was a big fan of advantage thinking. Unbeknown to me, he had bribed my hotel taxi driver to come and pick me up from the airport and take me on an advantage thinking diversion. So after a very long flight, I got into this really nice taxi and drove me off, not to my hotel, but down a very dark and dodgy looking side street. And as we drove off this track into this place, suddenly this guy on a motorcycle came up alongside the taxi, all dressed in black, visor down, carrying what in my mind I thought must be some kind of weapon about to attack me. And then suddenly the electric windows wound down. I actually thought, this is the end of my life. This guy is coming towards me. It's the end. And instead of which, suddenly his visor went up and out boomed this voice, advantage thinking, advantage thinking. And instead of a weapon, he was actually carrying garlands of flowers. So I've always thought since that's what advantage thinking is in terms of challenging us to rethink how sometimes we see the world negatively when actually there are garlands of flowers waiting for us. So that's an important memory for me. And my last memory is to think about those who perhaps aren't here today, but are definitely here in spirit. So firstly, for me, over the last 10 years, unfortunately, both my parents have died. But my parents are very visible for me in the original TEDx speech in terms of their investment and belief in what I could achieve as an individual. But the other person who isn't here, as David's mentioned, is of course James Slowey, who's very much, the advantage thinking is as much a legacy of James Slowey as it is of me. And Jane very importantly gave me the space and the chance to develop the thinking in it for advantage thinking. And more than that though, she was the decisive factor to be able to influence others and take the voice out much, much further. In the last 10 years, I think I've written 100,000 possible great ideas, but none of them are ever going to be remembered in 10 years' time because advantage thinking depended upon Jane's ability to make all those connections work. and I don't really have Jane to work with anymore. But like many others today, I think she'll always be in my heart. And on that voice, on that point, I want to pass on now to an organisation I know that Jane always had a lot of time for, Your Housing Group, and to hear some stories from Andy and his team in terms of what Advantage Thinking has done for them over the last 10 years.
Thanks, Colin. It's always difficult to follow somebody like Colin on a speech. I didn't actually take that into account when we were planning, but I'm going to let the majority of my presentation today, I'm going to let some videos do my talking for me. As a FOIA-fed board trustee, I'm working in FOIAs for 22 years. I'm proud to present Your Housing Group's snapshot of Advantage Thinking today. I believe as passionately in the FOIA model today as I did in 1999. I'm broadcasting from Verve Place today in Warrington in northwest England. I'm donning my navy, Advantage Thinking t-shirt. Verve Place was the first supported housing PFI in 2008, but we also have 3 other FOIAs. Coops FOIA in Wigan, which was the first to be built in 1996, alongside the famous Uncle Joe's mint balls factory. We have Ravenhead FOIA in St Helens, which Princess Anne opened in 1997. And we also have Bridge FOIA in historic Chester, which was built in 1998. Your Housing Group's involvement in FOIAs has been 25 years. It seems like a lifetime ago. And when you consider the age of most of our current FOIA young people, it is a lifetime ago. All 4 of our FOIAs have been through the FOIA Federation for Youth Accreditation, and they all got their highest possible grade. But it's not just our FOIAs. We've invested in the Advantage Thinking research project, which we published this year. Colin's already mentioned the marketing team with the mail shots and videos and logos for today's event. And we also have the Advantage Thinking modules for all staff, which is on our in-house training portal. And we also have David here today, who's a commissioner lead in our Wigan area, so asking plenty of questions later. In FOIAs, we have responsibility that comes with enabling young people to take ownership of their lives. I've had the opportunity to work with a whole host of the best people, from innovators to realists, people who are passionate and authentic, but people who really do care for others. And I've been inspired by many young people's journeys. I truly believe that in FOIAs, staff have a DNA that sets them apart. My DNA was tapping into my talent for middle distance running, age 12. With the guidance of my coach, my mentor, I was introduced into a world of ambition, aspiration, discipline, hard work, dedication, lifelong friends. And it's some of that I want for all young people, the opportunity to thrive in life. Which leads me to another person who has that DNA deeply rooted in her blood, the wonderful Lisa McWalters. Her video story is the essence of the Advantage Thinking career journey, and we're going to share that with you now. Kate, are you all right?
When I first came to the FOIA, I started my journey 16 years ago. I was at college, 16 years of age, struggling in a school environment. So my school wasn't a school structure really. My school got shut down. So when I went to college, it was a school-like structure that I was really struggling with, and it just wasn't for me. I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I didn't have that career advisor that, would sit down and, ask me what my strengths and my weaknesses was. So I decided to leave school and look for an apprenticeship. I applied for Arena Housing for an admin role, which I believed was a council admin job. When I went for my interview, I arrived 15 minutes early. And when I got there, I quickly realised it wasn't a council building or offices. It was a young people scheme. I didn't actually know what a young people scheme was. I just knew there was young people there. I started reading notice boards and leaflets that was round in reception and listening to little bits of conversations, just to give me a bit of an idea of what I was being interviewed for. I've always lived in that area where Ravenhead FOIA is, but I've never actually known what the building was. I went into the interview and I did secure the job.
the next 16 years, I feel like it just happened in a blink of an eye. I remember my first day at Ravenhead Foyer, and I remember I went to school with quite a lot of the young people, which is hard to believe now, 17 years later. But I absolutely loved the role. When I was 17 working at Ravenhead, I feel like the young people that was living there was probably more grown up than me. They was holding their own tenancies down. They had all these responsibilities. I was still living at home with my mum, still learning to drive. I didn't really have much responsibilities or commitment, but it never was just an admin role. And I genuinely don't think I'd have stayed committed to the job at Ravenhead or in YPS if it was just an admin role. I think I'd have got bored quite quickly. At such a young age, working at Ravenhead Foyer, I feel like I probably gained more than the young people living there. That first job, it taught me how to be a responsible adult, how to be a team member, how to stay committed. Looking at the bigger picture and always trying to change your perspective on things. I was trying to motivate young people and encourage them, but looking back, I think it was them that was motivating me to make a difference and get up and show up every day. And then 3 years at Ravenhead, I feel like gave me the foundations for, my journey in YPS, for all these 16 years that I've worked here, and probably, for a lot of my life at home as well. So my next steps, I was modern apprentice at Ravenhead, what only seemed like a few months. I want to say it must have been longer than that, but it didn't feel very long. I was then offered the customer service officer position as on like a secondment. So I had to still carry on with my qualification, my MBQ, but still secured like a full-time role and position. I think I was in that position for around 2 years, but within that 2 years, I had my oldest son. I had a maternity leave for 6 months and built an house, my first house, so I did all that within 2 years. When I come back to work, I was really interested in the accommodation support officer job. It was all about numbers, figures, it was moving young people in, it was interviewing them, it was everything I wanted to do really, and the lady that was currently doing the job, she was pregnant and due to go off on maternity leave. I would stay late at night, and on the weekends that she used to do a shift on a weekend, I would come in to try and learn the role to give me that best chance to secure the position. I did secure that position while she was on maternity leave, and I absolutely loved it. I'm a very competitive person. People that know me will tell you how competitive I am. And we used to have this system where you could see everybody else's figures in YPS. So, all the other foyers, rent figures and, void figures. And I would make sure every week that, my figures were better than theirs. I had to, even if it meant staying late and catching new people and, making sure that, them figures was always the best. While I was doing that job, the new scheme in Warrington was already being built and it was ready to, it was ready to open. It was interviewing for all the positions, this new exciting scheme, purpose built in Warrington. So I applied for the accommodation officer job because it was a full-time position and secured that. And I feel like I have been here ever since. I think I secured that position in 2000. We opened in 2008. And I've been here ever since. And then I've been in the deputy manager position since 2013. I'm still here, 2021. But yeah. So the best part of my role is the versatility. It's that every day is different. You don't know what you're walking into each day. It's having, them little things that you do every day, but having the biggest impact on young people that are around you. It's a young person coming back years later saying, you've changed my life, this experience changed my life. But, when I think about that, we didn't change their life, they did. It was just giving them that space to do that and that investment and belief in them. It's allowing young people, that space living here to, make mistakes and learn from them, but making sure they have them structures and boundaries around them. I never pretend to know what it's like living here. Young people will tell me all the time, you don't know what it's like to live in this scheme, and I don't. I will never pretend to know what it's like to live here. But going through the journey with young people, so going through the ups, the downs, everything that they're going to experience, and it's celebrating that success at the end of it. That's the best part of my role. I feel extremely lucky to be able to work in this environment daily and be given that opportunity at such a young age to do it. Out of the 7 advantage thinking tests, the one I'm most passionate about is believe. Genuinely believe that, you know, young people living in supported housing, their dreams and aspirations should be no different to my sons, my partners, my family members, my friends. You know, genuinely believe that, you know, with young people, with the right time, investment, you know, commitment, you know, they can achieve anything. You know, if a young person comes to me and says, I can't do this, or, you know, I can't, I will always challenge that. Well, why can't you? Why can't you do that? You know, it's the same for anybody. With that commitment, focus and hard work, they can do anything they want. And I believe with the right investment in a young person, they will always shine, whether that be in a little bit or a massive way, that, you know, that time, commitment and investment, they will always shine. And advantage thinking to me it's a mindset. It's, you know, it's something that has the ability to change your life. It's flipping the picture and thinking outside the box. It's, you know, can you imagine advantage thinking being taught at such a young age on a national curriculum? You know, so you're investing in that future generation. Imagine, you know, young people in years to come that, you know, have been taught about advantage thinking all the way throughout school as a lesson or a subject, how that would be in society years down the line. You know, it's that, you know, be kind movement from last year, people not needing to be reminded of, you know, be kind. It comes naturally. You know, it's that newspaper headline that, you know, youths in Warrington, what would you automatically think with that? Would it be that, you know, it's the creative, aspirational, amazing young people living in Warrington? You know, I would hope so. If I was to meet Boris Johnson in a lift today, I would want him to leave this foyer knowing it's more than just a place for young people to live. You know, it's the environment, the ethos, the challenge, the buzz, it's everything. And I'd want him to know it's a hub for young people that has no limits, you know, it's have endless possibilities. And I would really want him to invest more in his future generations of the country.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sure there's lots of you out there who can resonate with Lisa's story. If you do, and you want to share them, please share them with the Foyer Fed. Advantage thinking complements our Foyer offer, our delivery, policy and ethos. But advantage thinking is wider in your organisations, in your charities, in life. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's about looking after each other and treating each other as we want to be treated. Please do contact the Foyer Fed if you haven't already become part of the advantage thinking movement and you want to know more. You may have seen some of the pre-event videos showcasing the 7 tests this week, and some of our young people in your housing group were telling you what advantage thinking meant to them, and that went out yesterday. But it wouldn't be right for me not to share some of the brilliant staff teams we have in your housing group and what advantage thinking means to them. Kate, over to you again.
To me, advantage thinking means focusing on the strengths of our young people, what they enjoy and what they're good at. It also means empowering the young people I work with to achieve their full potential.
What advantage thinking means to me, I think of it more as a mindset, an intrinsic culture rather than just a set of rules and procedures. Previously, when I've tried to explain this to other people, I've said that advantage thinking is a belief system almost. It's a code by which we must try to live our daily working lives. At the heart of everything, advantage thinking also allows us to celebrate and promote young people's strengths and talents rather than merely define them by their deficits.
Advantage thinking is a style and approach that helps a young person in their personal development and recognising their ambition.
Advantage thinking, to me, is always finding new and innovative ways to engage and work with young people. They come to us with a problem and we find the solution and work with them to achieve and overcome whatever that problem was.
So advantage thinking to me is creating a positive approach to help the young people, whether that be finding out what talents or interests that they have, and then helping them pursue, the right paths to achieve and further develop those talents or hobbies.
For me, advantage thinking means working with young people in a positive, forward-thinking way. We aim to provide opportunities for them to participate and engage in sessions or activities that they enjoy. Initially, we work on their strengths and improve the relationship we have with the young person, as opposed to starting with their support needs or areas of focus. Rather than trying to fix a young person, we build a rapport with them and try and help them to work through their own challenges.
Three words that describe advantage thinking to me are empower, strength and positivity.
Three words that I think describe advantage thinking: talent, opportunities, ambition.
Three words for me that describe advantage thinking: positivity, progressive, and challenging, definitely.
The three words that sum up advantage thinking to me are believe, understand and talk. This is really important when engaging young people.
The three words that I describe advantage thinking would be creativity, positivity, and goal-related.
Three words that summarise advantage thinking for me are rapport, trust and opportunity.
Sorry. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. We're now going to spend some time in breakout rooms for 10 minutes so you can share your advantage thinking stories. And the title of the breakout room is How the Power of Advantage Thinking Stories and the Importance of Personal Qualities Can Advance Social Change. Don't be shy. Kate, over to you.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back from your rooms. If there's any burning insights from the conversations you've just had, please feel free to share them in the chats, and we'll be happy to follow up on anything. Welcome, everyone. So we're now moving on into a bit of inspiration now in terms of a chance to hear from some international voices. I think it's very symbolic that advantage thinking was always been an international idea, not just because the TEDx speech was in Greece, but a lot of the research into the background thinking on asset-based approaches actually came from research that we did in America, and also looking at the development of the sustainable livelihoods approach used in the work of the international development sector. So the roots of advantage thinking have always been very international. I've really been delighted to see then how advantage thinking has grown in other countries, as I mentioned before, in Ireland, in the Netherlands, and all the way across to Australia. So today we're delighted to share some of those voices with you. We're going to start off with a little video from our friends in Melbourne, the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, and hear from one of their practitioners, Mark Cox, who's going to share a bit about the story of advantage thinking in Melbourne. If we can hear their video, please, because it is very late in Melbourne at the moment.
Hey there, Colin, and to everyone celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Advantaged Thinking. My name's Mark Cox. I work for the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. We're an organisation based in Melbourne, Australia, working across Australia actually to support our young people around the practice approach of advantaged thinking. The programs that we support work with young people in not only foyers in the housing sector, but supporting young people to transition from state-based care and out-of-home care into better outcomes in society, but also supporting young people who are newly arrived in Australia, those that have been refugee asylum seeking young people, to settle into this country. We have programs across the employment space, so we support young people in that transition into work to ensure that they have a sustainable livelihood framed around what's important to them and the goals that they have for their life. What unites all of these programs, of course, is advantaged thinking. For us, it's been absolutely incredible over the last 10 years to really draw on all of your teachings, Colin, all of your ideas. And I guess from the rest of the sector here and those assembled to celebrate this birthday, we continue to be inspired by your work as well. We'd like to think that over the last 10 years, we've really grown and refined the way that we interpret and understand advantaged thinking. But we, of course, share in the idea that advantaged thinking is not something that you ever arrive at. So for us, the 10 years has been one of great discovery, of really interesting innovation, creativity. We continue to get inspired by this work and the work of our practitioners out there. In Australia, we have hundreds of youth workers that have been sharing in that message of advantaged thinking, and they continue to advance this practice approach. With all our programs and associated partnerships across this country, we have thousands of young people that are being reached in this way. And, you know, the jury is in or out. Advantaged thinking has been working, and for us, it's been something that we've really tried to evidence over the last 10 years. We know that this way of working is the way that all people should be worked with and alongside, and we're really curious about how advantaged thinking can be applied across not only our youth programs, but in our other programs organisationally and in our wider sectors also. We have begun some forays into that, and I think when it comes to thinking about those sort of next 10 years of advantaged thinking, there are some new frontiers that we're really looking forward to confronting and really challenging. And I guess for us, once again, that's the exciting part of advantaged thinking, the fact that that nirvana of advantaged thinking is always out there. We can't claim that advantaged thinking is best practice yet. It's good practice on the way to being best practice. Maybe we'll reach it, maybe we won't, but certainly it will take a long time for us, and our continued ability to be challenged and open to new ways of working will allow us to get closer to what that best practice looks like. And, you know, as I said, that for us is what drives us day to day in our work. It's why I'm so passionate about the work of advantaged thinking and all that it inspires across not only our own workers here, but those of other organisations who are equally able to challenge, to really bring to life those really positive ways of engaging and challenging young people around what they're great at, raising those expectations for them in their life so that they can be supported to reach the dreams and the goals that they have set out for themselves. Congratulations once again, Colin. Wish we could have been there to celebrate in person and to hear about all of the wonderful testimonies and, you know, how the journey has been over the last 10 years for a whole lot of other organisations. Hopefully by this video tribute, you have a sense of, I guess, just how far this campaign has spread. Certainly in Australia, it's something that we are looking to continually evolve ourselves around, and we can't wait for another 10 years of collaboration, partnership and inspiration. Thanks so much once again. Wishing you all the very best for your anniversary/birthday. Thanks and bye.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. I saw one of the references in chat that advantaged thinking is pure sunshine. That's something I always feel when I go to Australia and feel their excitement and enthusiasm. One of the things that that Brotherhood of St. Lawrence have done is created their own advantaged thinking champions group as a way of bringing different staff across the organisation to make it more sustainable. So I think that's one brilliant idea that they've led on in Australia. So from Australia, we're going to move over to Ireland, and very interestingly, one of the workers from the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence went back to Ireland and took the advantaged thinking with her, which in an organisation called Northside Partnership, but within whom those ideas and philosophies are already living inside the organisation. So we're delighted to invite Northside Partnership to Needs to come and promote and share what some of the learnings been at Northside Partnership.
Thanks, Colin. And as the speaker after you said, I've been following Mark Cox around after his presentations for a very long time, and he always looks invariably more fashionable and sunny than I. But anyway, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Mctiernan. I'm the Director of Services at Northside Partnership, and this is my colleague.
And I'm Niamh Byrne, and I'm the HR Manager for Northside Partnership.
So just to give you a little bit of context, Northside Partnership is a local development company established in 1991. We have about 70 staff between full-time and part-time, and we're really on the beginning of an advantaged thinking journey. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about who we are, what our ambition is, and then Niamh is going to talk about the HR aspect of it. I know we only have 7 minutes, so I'm going to try and be quick. It's not my forte. So we're on the road to becoming an advantaged thinking organisation, and I suppose, Kate, you can actually move on to the next slide. Some of the really fundamental pieces of work we've done is around our strategy statement. So in 2019, we made the bold statement that we are becoming an advantaged thinking organisation. And that's in a statement to our own teams, but also the wider sector here about advantage thinking. So that was a very important step in the journey. And we also have done a number of things so far. So again, we're a local development company. We work across a number of offers. So we have education training, community development, health and well-being, and social enterprise supports, business supports. And we work from pre-birth really into that full transition into adulthood. So again, it's across a number of different cohorts and ages that we're working in. We've done a lot, I suppose. We've a lot more to do. We've looked at one of our programs called the Challenger program, which is around the transition from primary school to secondary school here. And Colin very generously came over and worked with us to develop a Challenger resource manual, which has been one of our key advantage thinking products, for want of a better word, but certainly a framework for how we're delivering one of our programs. And we hope to roll that out across more programs. We've been trialing some advantage thinking tools in our local employment services. We have done a number of things around local development planning, bringing in that concept of the deal, the mutuality of what the community can do and what we can do, and how we actually are mutual beneficiaries of an advantage thinking approach. We've looked at some employment engagement strategies, again with that advantage thinking lens, that kind of mutual investment, mutual gain, and how we can work in the CSR field. We've also done quite a bit of training with our staff. So Colin again has been over and started the Advantage Thinking Champion training. We've briefed the board of the Northside Partnership around what advantage thinking really means to them. Our comms person who's on the video today, Sarah, has been working really hard to make sure advantage thinking is at the core of all of our communications and messaging. And I think that really leads us on to the point that Niamh is going to talk about next, like the core functions of an organization, how advantage thinking can be embedded in the core functions of an organization so that it can live and breathe. And I really liked where people said earlier that advantage thinking, to us, it's a way of being. It's not just the tools that we create. It's not just the products or the policies or the frameworks. It's really about how we live it every single day. So I'll pass on to Niamh, who's going to talk a little bit about the HR strategy around advantage thinking, because I think that might be of interest to other organisations.
Thanks, Niamh. And I suppose if you wouldn't mind just moving on that slide there, Kate, please. It's just one slide that I have where it comes to people, but it covers the whole employee journey through an organisation. And what Niamh was saying, it's a way of being, but how do you actually get advantage thinking to become a way of being within an organisation? In my mind, culture is just so important. And in order to actually really sort of, I suppose, thrive within an organisation and grow within an organisation, the culture has to be support that. So in my mind, advantage thinking is a really, really good way of being. It's a fantastic mindset. And I love the principles behind it. So from my role, when I joined Northside Partnership, I suppose Niamh joined in around the same time as me. So we've been on a bit of a journey over the last couple of years. So currently, if we actually look at that journey and start with your recruitment, and I think from a core function perspective, it's so important to get the message out there from the very start. So from our adverts going out, from our job interviews, job descriptions, everything about it includes an advantage thinking mindset the whole way through the process. Somebody comes in, they're inducted into the organisation. Their induction also has to include an advantage way of thinking. So it actually plays quite a big part within the induction of new employees coming in. But it's always surprising when you're actually in interview stage, because we have it in the job description. So 9 times out of 10, it's going to come up, and you actually really know the people that are interested in the concept by some of the answers that they're actually giving you. As Niamh mentioned there, we are an advantage thinking champions. We're doing a lot of training in that area at the moment. But even there recently, we put on supervision training for staff, and I would have had a fairly good conversation with the trainer beforehand to make sure that his way of thinking was similar to ours where it came to supervision. So looking at a strengths-based approach rather than actually looking at a negative supervision two-way conversation. So, but it really is so important that you do get the right people into the organization that are going to go along with your ethos and spread the word. HR documentation is key, and I know people eyes glaze over when you talk about policies and procedures and things like that, but you have to have a reference, and it has to be, and I think from a HR perspective, and it's something like, I've been in HR for an awful long time, and it's really only recently that really resonated with me that HR, policies, procedures, everything to do with HR looks at the deficit. It's always looking at the worst case scenario. So it's actually trying to move that mindset and put it into a positive frame and bring an advantage thinking lens into what you're actually writing. Can't say I've done it right all the time, and I'm still learning and have a long way to go. I think there's been a couple of documents that we have worked on. One, at the moment, we're just about completing a competency framework. And I know Niamh was involved in that, there was a team across the organisation that sat down and sort of looked at it, okay, well, what do we want from our staff? What behaviours do we want? What sort of areas do we really want to focus on? And what are the behaviours that are really important to us as a partnership organisation? So we have put a competency framework together, and it's really a lot of training will go into it to actually get the message out there, but it really forms, I suppose, the basis of the behaviours that we will actually really want within the organisation. Because as I think was Andy said earlier on about the DNA, we want advantage thinking to be in the DNA of everybody that actually works within Northside Partnership. And the only way of doing that is by communication, messaging, getting the word out there on a constant basis, and with some tangible information that people can refer to. It can be a concept, but you actually need to make it a practice, and you need to make it part of your organization. And if that is the case from an employee relations perspective, life is going to be a lot easier, because you're building trust, you're building belief in your staff, you're creating opportunities, and you're looking at the person in themselves rather than just the job that they're doing. I hope that makes sense to you. And obviously communication is key to everything. And Sarah, who is on the line as well, is the champion, definitely in that area. I'll pass you back to Niamh, thanks.
Thanks, Kate. There's just one more slide left. I'm just going to leave you with one of our star stories. Again, that's part of the strategy. We're not looking at case studies. People aren't cases to be studied, but we're looking at star stories, and I'll just leave you with that one. But I suppose, like Mark and others have said, I really want to reflect on Colin's contribution. It's funny how life takes you on these journeys, and you meet people at particular times of your life. And also our CEO, Paul Rogers, who was really interested in asset-based community development. So I think people have come from, different countries, different practices, but the advantage thinking narrative really sits with us all. So I mean, from today, I'm hoping that we can make links with any of your organizations. We're absolutely happy to share any of our resources, because that is what advantage thinking means to me and our organization. So yeah, delighted to have been here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You're absolutely right. There's a generosity of spirit in advantage thinking, which is really important, and we really appreciate what you're sharing today. And on that note, so we're hoping I can move on now to introduce Danny Sutton, all the way from Hobart. Hopefully he's in the room. It is very late in Australia at the moment, so it might be past 11:30 or something. Danny, there you are. How is life in Hobart?
It's dark and cold, but looking forward to the weekend.
Brilliant. Well, we were thinking the sun always shines in Australia.
It does, yeah.
So Danny, tell us about your amazing journey with advantage thinking at Colony 47.
Yeah, look, thank you for the opportunity, Colin. I mean, it's a bit humbling to be amongst so many amazing practitioners so far across the world. But I think I'll start with people and place. I think that's really important for me. We're an advantage thinking organisation. We don't see it as being a service issue. We think it's a part of the DNA that we need to create for our people. And we actually take very much a people first approach. So from our point of view, it is about how we connect. And there's two things that we really focus on, I think, in the way we think about it. Two concepts that I think are very important. The first one is I think the idea that culture beats strategy every day of the week, for me, is something that's so inherent about how we work and how we think about things. But the other thing, we're very ambitious for advantage thinking. We think that it has much more to give, and our ambition is actually to use it as a way to create ecosystems that solve complex human problems. So we're not just thinking about it in terms of today and people. We think that it's got much more power to actually bring people together to create very new and different ways of working. And we're already seeing some of that in our own organisation. But just a little bit about us. Colony 47 is based in Tasmania in Australia. Tasmania is a small island off the south coast. It's about the same size as Ireland. We've got a population of about 500,000, Ireland about 10 times that much. And Tasmania's roots are very much in its environment, in the place it is in the world. And we have a very strong ecological and environmental footprint that we're very proud of in the world. So we see ourselves as being very much part of that place. And it's customary in Australia too that we do reflect on the place we're in, and the Indigenous communities were the first inhabitants of the place that we live in. And it's very customary, as I should do now, to reflect that we should always value the traditions and place that we live in. And we do, as a custom in our place, reflect and acknowledge the original owners of the lands on which which I am today, and also pay our respects to their elders past, present and future. It's about place, and I think place is really important in the places we live. Colony 47 operates in housing and youth space. We've got about 120 employees working in housing and with young people. We field about 40,000 inquiries a year on housing, and we've got about 1,000 young people we're working with today in southern Tasmania. So that's our kind of footprint. We've been working now with advantage thinking for about 5 years, and it's been an incredible journey for us because I think it started with a view that it was something that we could apply in a service, and it could apply in a way that we thought could enhance a service like transition to work. But as we've leaned more into the ideas and concepts behind it, we actually think it's about a human condition. It's about an approach, a way of working that isn't just about how we work with people that we are supporting, it's actually about how we work with ourselves. So the way that we've applied advantage thinking is we apply it to every individual in our organisation as a way of working, including our board, including the people that we're working with in services. And we're applying it now as a way of creating ecosystems. So when we connect with people now, we begin with the 7 tests. And what it does for us, it creates a connection at a values level that gets down to about being human first. So when we apply 7 tests and we talk about them with the people we work with, whether it's our own staff, whether it's our board, whether it's the people we're working with on the ground or other service providers, if we can connect around the 7 tests, we have an amazingly much deeper conversation. We have an amazing, much more committed and fulfilling approach. And what it's actually doing is changing the way that we work. And we love doing it because it actually challenges us every day to fulfill the promise that I think the 7 tests provide for us. It connects us to our why, but it also allows us to create the how. And in doing that, we can do anything. We can really apply these things in very innovative ways. So the things that we're doing now to really make advantage thinking, I guess, central to those ecosystems is that we're applying it to ourselves first. So as we've heard from Neve, the first thing that we do is we bring people into advantage thinking as a culture. It's a way we work. We work people first. We work in a human way. And what it does, it brings people into an environment where they can contribute, they can put ideas forward, they can make a difference in a way that they're heard, listened to, understood, and it creates an environment when they're working with people in our services that they know they can be supported in the innovation and ideas that they have. And by doing that, we create an environment where people come first, but they're supported in the things they do because we trust them, because we know that they hold an advantage thinking perspective, and it actually changes the way that we can support them on the ground. So last year during COVID, a lot of services across Australia were shut down. When we sat down with our exec team and our board, we said, we shouldn't do that. The thing we should be doing, this is our time to shine. So we sat down with our executive team and we said, we're going to keep everything open and we're going to continue every service. And we went out to our staff and we said, how do we do it? And through an advantage thinking lens, they basically reconstructed every one of our services using technologies, using relationships, using innovation, and not one of our services stopped for the whole time. Now, we couldn't have done that without advantage thinking, because we wouldn't have had the connective tissue, the value sets, the ambition that we'd created around our own people allowed that to seamlessly happen. And it gave permission for people to actually connect to the idea of doing it differently because things had changed, but never losing sight of the why. Why are we here? What are we here to do? And because of that experience now, we're now looking at creating new ecosystems with our other providers, other services that we're working with, to try and create the same sort of ambition. And what we're now seeing is a different way of working. So over the last 5 years, being in this advantage thinking approach, we've done about 3 things that have really changed the way we operate. The first thing, our board has become more focused on the why. And we've actually offloaded about $2 to $3 million worth of services with our board support because we felt other people could do it better. And in the meantime, we've created about $4 to $5 million worth of new services in the areas that we think we can do better using these tools. And it's created a much more agile and innovative approach to the way that we work. The other thing it's done, it's totally changed our internal organisation. Our organisation kind of works like an amoeba. When there's problems and issues in front of people, they just shift to them and they work on them and they create new ways of working. And by doing that, we're finding that we're being much more agile. We're actually hitting the problems a lot harder, but we're doing it with so much more input from the people across the organisation. So our organisation now isn't one set of service or 2 sets of services or 3 sets of services. It's about what problems are we trying to solve. And if there's 5 services that have an interest, they're the problem solvers in the room and they create the new way of working. The other thing that we've really found too is by working this way, our people have felt much more fulfilled. We've actually put a lot more work into leadership and development with them. And just as an indication, it can be a very demanding area for people to work in our area because of the issues they're dealing with. In the last 18 months, we've had no significant health and safety issues across the organisation. We've had no workers' compensation claims. And it's because people are in an innovative environment where they're sharing the load. They focus a lot on self-care because they're working with each other much more actively. And also they're sharing a lot of the issues in a way that they can get positive feedback. The other thing that Colin and I did when Colin was down here a couple of years ago, we went and saw the Minister for Housing and Colin talked to him about advantage thinking. And it was amazing and he still talks about it today, Colin, in that it connects with people at all levels. When we started talking about it with him, he shared a lot of stories with me since, Colin, about the impact on his thinking about his family, how he works with his staff. So this is the issue with advantage thinking. I think if we narrow it down just to be about how we work with young people, we forget about how powerful it is for ourselves and the networks that we build around how we work. So we see this as being not just an ambition to try and support young people, we actually see it as an ambition for creating a people-first culture that can create so much more. So the ambition we hold is very high, and we're currently working to try and codify this in terms of how do you put an advantage thinking frame on whole organisation. So we're now working with our finance teams, our asset teams, our people and culture teams, our IT teams to be part of advantage thinking. And all of a sudden they're creating huge new ideas about how to do new technologies, about how to finance new innovative ideas, about how to create new training that supports people because they feel part of the culture, they feel part of the effort, and they feel like they can contribute. So I guess in parting, I'd like to sort of say that we're ambitious. We see this as being something that's much more than just about a service offering. And we do see that there's a way of bringing this to people that's much more powerful than we think. There's 4 elements we're working on now to try and codify it. One is looking at the impacts and outcomes that we're having and trying to put evidence to it. Secondly, how do we build new solutions and building new ideas around that? Thirdly, to look at how it's improving our organisation and the way that we work in terms of an excellence framework around how we operate. And fourthly, to constantly be challenging ourselves and to focus on active learning in the way that we work. So we think if we can keep leaning into these issues, we're probably going to be a different organisation, but it's because we're solving the problems that we want to solve into the future. So again, Colin, it's been an amazing journey for us, but we are all in because we see so much about how this changes the way that we believe in ourselves, the way that we impact on others, and the way we can create ecosystems that create real change. So that's our ambition, and we hope that we can continue to lean into it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Danny. I think that focus on the ambition has been really powerful to hear. We're all in too. Thanks so much for all our international speakers. We're now going to move into a quick breakout, and Kate, you're going to put the question into the chat for people to focus on. It's just going to be a quick breakout, and then we'll followed by, I think, a break. Welcome back, everyone, from your 5-minute break. We're now going to enter our final few sections of today. We've got a very exciting funder panel, so I'm delighted to introduce 4 different funders today. We asked our funding panel a couple of questions. I'm just going to read the question out so you know what it is they're replying to. How do you use or promote an advantage thinking approach in your work with organisations? And from your experience, how do you think more funders could be encouraged to support and apply advantage thinking? So we asked our funders to come back with a sort of 5-minute reply to that nice question. We're going to start, I'll introduce them one by one in terms of their speaking. So we're going to start with Joanne Rich, who's the head of Youth Voice at the National Lottery Community Fund and is also a trustee of the Foy Federation. Jo, can you kick us off?
Yeah, of course, with pleasure. And Colin, you must be so proud. It's so humbling to be here today, and an incredible family, shall we say, of like-minded individuals. So thanks for having us here today. So just to give you a bit of heads up, I was lucky enough to meet Colin about 5 years ago when I was actually in housing. So I come from a youth sector background and I've worked across different sectors and bringing all that incredible learning into a funding background. So I now work for the National Lottery Community Fund, the biggest funder of children and young people projects across the country. And we give out over £600 million a year to communities, and a third of that is to children and young people. So we've definitely been on a journey. Our strategy, so I was going to go through the asset spot kind of pointers to help with the framing of today, and I have to apologise because there is building work in the background, so I'm really sorry if you can hear that. I've moved to every room in the house, literally. But yeah, it's just to say that for me, like, advantage thinking is about thinking and challenging yourself at all levels, and to think outside the box. So to do that within funding is a great opportunity, and I feel really privileged to do this role, to look kind of internally at the mechanisms at the lottery, but also as our position and influence being like with our reach and scope across the country, and with all the funded projects that we have. So just to give you a flavour of a couple of the things that some were already there and some we've kind of implemented over the last 18 months since we've had young people involved at the lottery. So looking at identity, our strategy is people in the lead, leads to thriving communities, and that's very much what we're trying to do by putting young people in the lead, and ironically that's the name of our young people team. So we've embedded that as part of our future pathway for youth voice. Through know-how, we kind of build staff knowledge, because that will lead to kind of better quality grant making in the long term. So the young people that we've got involved have created webinars and toolkits for our staffs to improve their quality in what they're looking for in programmes. We amplify young people's voices, and there's the banging that's amplifying in the background, that through positive perceptions, and it's something I've always been keen on in every kind of sector and job role, is really putting young people in the positive light that they so deserve and should be. So we've just recently done an Instagram strategy for the comms team here, which is really exciting to watch this space over the summer, to see young people creating comms for young people by young people from the National Lotteries Community Fund channel, which is exciting. Through the work that they do as well, they've been able to shape policies externally, often government-led ones as well, which is really exciting. We help to connect, so through events that the young people in the lead have run, we're connecting other funders, but also kind of other sector leaders, and hopefully sharing all the great importance of involving youth voice. As I've mentioned, all of this is with young people, so it's through the YPIL team, young people in the lead, but also through making sure that all youth voice across our grant funded projects is feeding into us understanding priorities going forward. And then through every kind of young people panel that has been set up through all the sectors that I've worked in, it's really important that you invest and validate them and their involvement. So it's very much about the support network that you put around them, that one-to-one support, that encouragement, that recognition, and I'm a big believer in that. And then finally, what really excited me about the role here at the fund was the ability to mobilise and motivate and kind of get everyone else on board with this journey, which I'm hoping we can do today, but what we try and do through the events with putting young people in the lead. So often you wouldn't see me doing the presenting, it would be the young people. So what I would encourage others, so that was the other question, I'll just do it quickly because I'm not sure how long I've got, but just as a quick pointer, and some like there's a collaboration of funders, and I think a few of you are here today, so hi, especially Ruth from Paul Hamlin. There's some incredible funders doing a lot of great stuff, and all of us are on a journey, and that's the point of advantage thinking, we're always willing to learn. But a couple of things, if you're not already there and you're looking at it, it's things like looking at your language, so that's what's come out quite strong today, I think. Thinking about the accessibility to your applications and your monitoring, and how you're communicating with grant holders, but then obviously the beneficiaries and getting them involved. Comms to be led by young people that are involved with the funding, and then finally get young people involved everywhere. Really think outside the box at what kind of entry point into the organisation, from staffing, from governance. So we've got young people sat on the board and on the England committee now, as well as hopefully as well as decision making and assessments, helping staff locally. So really think at every point and think outside the box and have your light bulb moment of advantage thinking. Thanks, Colin. Or you're on mute, I think.
Colin, you're muted. Right, thank you so much, Joe. So it's great to see that that these days in the National Lottery Community Fund applications, it asks you to think about how your strengths based. I think that's really helpful. And I'm going to move on to Kate Hitchcock, a grant manager at the Great Paul Hamlin Foundation, have long been a supporter of advantaged thinking. Kate.
Hi. So I was really pleased to be asked to speak today because I have quite a personal connection with advantaged thinking, and this has really informed my engagement with it as a funder now. As a child, I went through a number of different adverse childhood experiences, and then when I was 16, I went to live in a foyer. And that was a great experience, and it helped to launch me off into university. And after uni, I was inspired by that experience, and I went to work for several years in the education sector and the youth sector. And that was great too. But I never really spoke about my lived experience. It just felt like something best kept quiet until 2013, I applied for a job at the Foyer Federation. And I thought to myself, you know, actually my experience is really relevant here. And so I disclosed it in my application and I ended up getting the job. And then I came to Foyer Federation and I learned about advantaged thinking. And that whole experience was a turning point for me. It was the first time I'd ever considered that it could be an asset. My lived experience could be an asset in my career and not something that had to be hidden. And that changed things for me in quite a profound way. I learned loads while I was there. I developed a whole level of confidence in myself, and it really led to a whole range of different opportunities for me inside and outside of work, and continues to do so. I actually disclosed my lived experience when I was applying for this job at PHF. And in the interview, I was able to talk about how the insight it gave me could actually be an asset to my work as a funder. And for me, that's what advantaged thinking is all about. You know, the adverse childhood experiences that I went through, they've had negative consequences, and I'm going to have to live with that forever. But it's also had positive ones. I've developed things like fortitude, compassion, insight. They've all been essential to my career, and I think it's the same for young people. And I think that's why funders should be investing in advantaged thinking approaches, because this way of working can help take people who've been through really difficult experiences and move them to a point where they're thriving and they're independent. And it can help them build on those experiences, good ones and the bad ones, to create something positive and powerful. Now at PHF, I work mainly on our youth fund, and this provides core funding for organisations who are working in an asset-based way with young people who have experienced some sort of challenging transition or barrier. And for us, asset-based means identifying, valuing, and nurturing people's strengths. And it means that recognising the role that young people can, and in my opinion should, play as leaders, not only within their own lives and peer groups, but also more widely in society. And I really want to highlight that for us at Paul Hamlin Foundation, it's not about a particular language or a particular terminology. It's about the values and the principles that organisations work to, and the focus they have on relationships and, you know, holistic working. And there are so many organisations out there that are doing this already. And at PHF, we want to encourage them and support them to develop further. I've been at PHF for 5 years now, and I've been absolutely just blown away by some of the organisations and the young people I've met, the things they've achieved. I've seen, just off the top of my head, I've seen youth-led anti-racism campaigns hitting the national headlines. I've seen young carers training hundreds of staff from the police and social services. I've seen young activists at the Houses of Parliament talking in front of MPs to advocate for better mental health support in schools. Just literally a few examples. There's so many more I could share with you. And the common thread is that these are young people who are supported by organisations working in an asset-based way, and they're making real change. Now, a challenge that I hear, I have heard, is that there isn't an evidence base that shows that this way of working is more effective than the traditional deficit-based model. I mean, personally, as an individual, I would flip that on its head. I'd say you can't prove that deficit-based models are better either. But I do think that, you know, we need to keep on finding ways to evaluate this approach and share the findings. And that's what we've been doing a bit at PHF. So we undertook a 3-year review of the Youth Fund, and that included a paper on asset-based working by an external evaluator called Renacci. So asset-based working rather than any particular terminology. And we found that we really had to start with the basics and take the time to define what we meant and what organisations meant by it as well. And one thing that came out from the report was that many organisations believe that this type of approach makes their work more effective, and they believe it's the right thing to do. They think it's important in their work with young people, but many of them struggled to articulate what it should look like. So at PHF, we've published our framework that came out from that. You can see it on our website. And we're now starting to think, okay, well, can we give some really tangible examples? So we're developing a series of case studies looking at different elements of asset-based working with how it plays out in different organisations. So we'll look at things like peer mentoring, youth voice, youth leadership, and those are going to get published shortly. So I think, in summary, as funders, we need to keep investigating, we need to keep documenting, and we need to keep sharing our learning. And I believe that as we do that, more people will come along on the journey with us, because I think the approach has merit and works.
Thanks so much, Kate. It's really inspiring to hear your own personal story, and also to know that funders are willing to take more responsibility to help us build the evidence base. That's really important. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move over to Safina Ahmed, Director of the John Ellerman Foundation, and always a font of great wisdom in the sector. Safina.
No pressure then. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And I'm actually here because of Kate, because it was Kate who introduced me to Colin. So back in 2016, I got introduced to the idea of advantage thinking. And for me, it was just such a sense of relief more than anything to have spoken with Kate and then to Colin and to learn about advantage thinking, because I finally felt like all of these various ideas I'd been having, and they were jumbled ideas and thoughts really, there was some clarity to it finally, there was some coherence to it, there was a sense that actually we could talk differently as civil society organisations, as funders, as charities. We could talk differently about how we work with individuals and communities across our society, and that we can do it in a way that recognises assets and abundance that exists within individuals, communities, our wider society, and to kind of switch the lens through which we think about things so that we are much more focused on the deficits that exist within our systems, and that's what needs addressing. It's not the individuals, it's not the communities as such. So we've had 2 questions asked of us this afternoon, and I'll try and talk through those. I will just say John Ellerman Foundation is a very small funder in the social action space. We support policy advocacy and campaigning work, and we also support environmental work and arts-based work too. We're evolving in our journey on advantage thinking and how we apply it to our own work. We by no means claim to be experts or finished, and I think we've heard a lot of that this afternoon. So I think the way that we can promote an advantage thinking approach, there's 3 things really that I'll touch on today. So the first is the language that we use, the second is around the decisions that we make, and the third for us is our focus on lived experience, which we describe as actively involving those with direct experience of an issue. So, personally, I know how important language and labels are and how much they can be used as a shorthand, perhaps to save time, sometimes for more wicked reasons than that. Often they fall short of what we really need and deserve as individuals and as communities. So at Ellerman, we think really carefully about the language that we use in things like our funding guidelines, our monthly blogs, any communication that we make to ensure that we are using assets-based language. We've also reviewed the language that we've been using to categorise our grants in the last year, and we've updated those so that they, the terminology, the way that we look at our data is a much better demonstration of advantage thinking. And we've been able to also contribute to a sector-wide initiative that's been happening since last August, which is around a diversity, equity and inclusion data standard. And that really has challenged our use of what I would describe as lazy language and labels that is often very deficits focused. So the second thing I mentioned was about the decisions we make. In our grant making, we're really proud to be able to support policy advocacy and campaigning work, and we feel really passionately about supporting that kind of work. When we review applications that we receive, we receive applications relating to a whole range of social issues, but we're very clear about supporting work around systems change and work that really centres and champions the experiences and the expertise of individuals and communities in a way that isn't extractive and is empowering. And then the third element I mentioned was around direct or lived experience. And we really challenged how organisations are doing that. And we aren't claiming to be experts, but we have thought very clearly about what does it look like to centre the voices of people who have the most experience of an issue and empower them to make change happen. And so if that's being delivered in the applications that we're receiving, then that's what we will support. But when it's done in this, we've heard lots of examples this afternoon about, ways in which that can be done poorly. And we've heard how to do it well, and that's what we're looking to support through our funding. And we're very clear when we give feedback to other groups where we don't feel that that's been met, that's why, because we don't think that people should be working with people in a way that is extractive or exploitative. And then what can we do to encourage funders to support and apply advantage thinking? Really echo the ideas that have already been shared. I guess what I will say is, Element is not a youth or children and young people's funder. We are a generalist funder and we support social action work. So I kind of feel like saying, if we can do it, and obviously there's much more that we can be doing and will do, but if we can do it, then I think all grant makers can apply this type of thinking and approach to their work. I don't think it's something that only the largest or medium-sized grant makers should be applying. I think genuinely, regardless of your size, this is an approach that you should be taking in the work that you do. So hopefully more and more funders will get introduced to this concept, be it through events like this or through other ways in which, colleagues at Paul Hamlin are disseminating research and so on and so forth. So I really hope that we can engage as many funders as possible and take this to those who are already children and young people or youth sector funders, but those that aren't as well. And then I think, the concept of advantage thinking should be reflected within the strategy documents and the funding guidelines and so on and so forth that grant makers produce. So the reason I met Colin was because I was writing a strategy for City Bridge Trust, which they still use, and it's called Bridging Divides. And I wanted to apply advantage thinking to that strategy. And so what that involved was me working with the team to introduce them to this concept. It involved me working with Colin to ensure I was using the concept appropriately in the strategy document. And by introducing colleagues to the concept properly and explaining to them why it mattered and how it could be applied in terms of the language used, the decisions made, and how they engaged with Londoners, I'd like to think that that is something that is embedded within their organisation. And so very, very encouraging of trying to, ensure it's written into how an organisation operates, as well as, spoken about in events like these and delivered in ways like Kate and Joe have already explained. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Safina, and it's really inspiring to hearing your passion, but also your concrete focus on what's useful and helpful. And I'm going to move on to our final speaker, David Gray, who's a commissioner from Wigan. It's often people think that commissioners are somehow the enemy of advantage thinking. That's certainly not the case, and I'm sure David's going to inspire us by showing how a commissioner can work in an advantage thinking way.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Colin, as well. It's an absolute pleasure to be on the panel this afternoon. As Colin said, I'm David Gray. I'm a service manager at Wigan Council, and my area of responsibility around commissioning is around homelessness, accommodation and support, drug and alcohol services, and around offender management. And I just wanted to sort of like start really by talking about as Wigan Council as an organisation where we've come from sort of like on a big journey ourselves in the last 10 years and really refocusing around sort of like what are we trying to aim to do, especially around some of the young people in the population. And I'm responsible for commissioning our amazing foyer that we have in Wigan, and I know colleagues that from your housing group have been on the call as well this afternoon and have seen them. And just the amazing approach that they adopt in Wigan is something to behold. But as an organisation, Wigan, we've been really careful in terms of sort of how we define ourselves. And we've established a programme called The Deal. And it's really redefining our relationship that we have with individuals, with the communities, with service providers, and what that looks like. And as an organisation, I don't think we can expect other providers to deliver that if we're not practising what we preach ourselves. So in terms of the principles that our deal has, I'll talk through the 6 principles. It's around having that ability to have different conversations with individuals, having that open mind, seeing each person as unique and looking at their assets and strengths in how we approach. It's around empowered communities. It's understanding the communities and enabling them to thrive and the people within them to thrive. It's around being fair and inclusive. So ensuring that everyone has the same opportunities, people feel like they belong and are always included. I'll talk a bit around our core behaviours that we have as a workforce, and we expect that our providers will embody as well. But it's around working together. It's around public services. It's around communities, organisations, businesses, working in the place, knowing each other, knowing that collectively we can have the biggest impact that we can to make sure that no one is left behind. And it's a real asset-based approach. And I'm really, and this is my passion, this area of work. And where I think our leadership has been absolutely unanimously strong, both our political leadership and corporate leadership, is having that freedom and permission to innovate and making sure that everyone at every level has the confidence to do what they know will make a difference. And one of the things that was at the heart of this, I spoke earlier around the different conversations that we want to see having within our own workforce with people right across the organisation. And it's around talking about different things. It's conversations which are important to people's lives. It's moving away from formal assessment and a reliance on forms. It's looking at that individual. It's valuing that whole person, their life story. It's exploring gifts and talents, that blank mind, seeing people with fresh pair of eyes, valuing unique strengths, the qualities of people, challenging assumptions, the amount of times we make assumptions on people, and quite opposite deficit-based approaches. And how do we do that? And it automatically allows you to expand the possible on what's there. And as a workforce, we're a big employer within the borough, commissioning and direct delivery. And we recognise that we can't deliver all this ourselves. We're not often the best place organisation to do this. So what organisations would we look to sort of like come in and support our delivery in this? It's people that have like advantage thinking at the heart of that approach, because we want organisations that embody the behaviours that we have in our workforce. So our key behaviours is around being positive. So it's being taking pride in all that you do. It's being courageous, being open to doing things differently. And it's around being accountable. And by that meaning, be responsible for making things better for individuals. And in terms of our broader strategy as an organisation, we've got the Deal 2030, our 10-year strategy, and a massive sort of big listening project that we embarked around this. And young people particularly playing a big part in this. And it was their inspirational ideas and enthusiasm around what that future could be like. Because some of the people that we're talking around in primary school now will be in working careers sort of like by the time the strategy is fulfilled, and talking around happiness, around homes and shared opportunities, fulfilling careers, good education, healthy environments. all stuff that we can influence now as organisations and partnerships. And that's what I think is really encouraging and really big around co-production around all of this. So as an organisation, this is where we've pitched ourselves. But part of that is we want to sort of like make sure that anyone that works in the organisation shares this culture, shares this belief, shares this approach. So we have what we call our deal for providers. And it's at the centre point for any sort of one that wants to work and bid for services in Wigan. And I'll just talk around some of the sort of principles of that, and you'll be able to see how advantage thinking organisations completely align with some of this. So it's around supporting the delivery of outstanding services, supporting assets and aspirations of Wigan residents. It's around true partnership to achieve the best outcomes for all. It's around celebrating successes and valuing the important work that services do. It's around co-design programmes of reform, training opportunities, support and investment in our young people. And it's around community wealth building, local investment, employment opportunities, choosing providers that are committed to supporting and contributing to our individuals and assets that make up our borough. And how do we make this real? Well, in terms of sort of anyone that we fund, that's a prerequisite. In terms of any tender evaluations that we do, there's questions around asset-based delivery. We check for all the languages, we evaluate all that to make sure that it's not deficit-based. I have a team of quality performance officers that can sound quite dull in sort of like technical language and can start contract management type stuff. It's not, it's around spending time in services, spending time with individuals, making sure that this culture is embedded within organisations. And I think what you can see is that the product of that in Wigan through the foyer at the heart of the approach, and I'll finish with a story, a real life story in a moment, but also asset coaches in our organisations as well. And my own personal sort of like experience of working in this area as well. I see individuals and the strengths that they bring, and having a sort of broad portfolio, it allows me to explore what the art of the possible is. So working within offender management, creating, I'm quite fortunate, I've never had sort of experience of the criminal justice system, but I know individuals and young people have, and actually them as mentors in terms of supporting and understanding the challenges that comes with that. Working in drug and alcohol services, creating recovery champions, that experience that can be invaluable, that I can't bring to that. So it's understanding where we can have providers and bring that lived experience to the forefront of delivery. And it's created so many opportunities in terms of apprenticeships and employment and working with businesses, with charities, all with this fundamental approach of advantage thinking at the start. So really it was sort of like, my sort of outline was basically sort of like, as organisations, we have to work differently, we have to think differently, and we have to recognise our place in this, which is completely sort of like co-production with organisations. And I hope if I can sort of like just finish with something that was published in our local paper about 6 weeks ago, which is a young woman that's been in our foyer in Wigan. And when you look at the experience, it was around life before the foyer was, in her words, rubbish, mental health declining, no friends, nobody to speak to about feelings, no opportunities, but felt like the foyer gave it a fresh start in life. And this is where you can see the real effect of advantage thinking. Saying during my time at the foyer, being able to think about what I really want to do, learn that I can become anything that I like. The foyer, an amazing place for all people from all backgrounds with different stories. So important, can't even put it into words. Don't know where I'd be without the foyer. So grateful it's there. And then the coup de grace on all of this, being that the ultimate success, being registered for our own apprenticeship in childcare, interviewing and getting the job as well. So people that come into this setting, that different way of thinking, that different approach, understanding and unlocking people's talents and avoiding the deficits, that's the real beauty around what you can do. And I would absolutely support any organisation coming into this borough that has that approach at its heart. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. It's great to hear the work that you've done in Wigan, really inspiring. And I hope we can sort of use your example to influence other commissioners around the country. But I know from my work with Homeless Link as well on strengths-based practice, there are lots of commissioners really interested in this approach, and it's great to hear that innovation. So thank you so much. I'm now going to pass over to thank all the funder panel. It's been a really great section, and I'm going to move on to Joel Lewis, who's going to take us into the final bit of inspiration on the day and hear where the Foyer Federation is bottling and taking all this inspiration into the future. Joel.
Thanks, Colin. Really, really great to hear all the different perspectives, some amazing stories about how advantage thinking has affected people's lives. So much wisdom in the room, and I'm really humbled just to listen to everyone's perspectives and to be able to share together. It's just felt really, really positive. I'm really glad we've recorded the event, because I think I'm going to have to watch it back. There's so many little gems in there that need unpacking. But before I forget, let me start by just thanking everyone who's helped put the event together. I want to particularly thank some of the staff at YHG, especially the support from their marketing team that we really relied upon to help create the event and get it out there. And of course, Colin, who's been at the centre of advantage thinking since its conception, David, and all the other wonderful contributors we've had from across the world. Also want to thank Renee for her t-shirt design, and my colleagues at the Foyer Federation, and everyone else that I've unintentionally forgotten about. It's been wonderful to see everyone and to hear everyone's stories. So I'm Joel. I'm the Chief Exec of the Foyer Federation, newly appointed in April, but I've been part of the organisation for just over 3 years. I want to talk a little bit about my own advantage thinking journey, and then have a bit of an opportunity to look forward at the future for advantage thinking. So 10 years ago, when advantage thinking was birthed, I was the support and engagement manager at the YMCA in Crewe. This picture is around that time. I was actually speaking at a Foyer Federation event, would you believe it? We just, at that time, we just moved into a purpose-built Foyer style building at the YMCA in Crewe. And we were working out how to create the best offer we could for young people. So we had really nice rooms and spaces, but we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just about that it was about how we work with the young people in that place. And we just started to engage with the Foyer Federation's program at that time. And I noticed Joel Attar had mentioned this program earlier, called Open Talent. And it was a pivotal moment in our thinking. And the introduction of advantage thinking at that time was a bit of a game changer for me as a service manager. It sparked us as an organisation and me to just change a lot of the way that we worked, everything from policies to how we recruit, and particularly brought a new focus on coaching and how to authentically engage with people. I remember at one point we started ripping up offices that had only just been built so that we could create better spaces for young people and staff to interact and to try and shift that power dynamic that you often see within a supported housing environment. However, when I really started to reflect on my own advantage thinking journey, it goes back further than 10 years. And I can really draw on experiences of what I would call advantage thinking now, before it was even a twinkle in Colin's eye. And so it's something that I believe resides in each of us that needs fanning into flame. I believe it's the most human thing we have to see each other as we really are, as beautiful beings, a complicated mix of strengths and weaknesses, confidence and vulnerabilities, but always trying to believe, always loving, and always growing in our relationships. And advantage thinking, I think, just simply names that thing that we feel and helps us to reflect and grow and challenge each other and to move forward so that we can create real change for those who get little opportunity to thrive. And there's been so many different perspectives that have been shared today that really have captured that. So thank you for doing that. So what is the future for advantage thinking? I think there's been some really great things already shared about this, and we'd love to hear more from you about how we can push an advantage thinking mindset and culture, how we can promote it, how we can live by it. And I think we think from a young person perspective that there's a lot of things that need to change within the systems and paradigms that we work in as professionals. At the Foyer Fed, we believe that there's more of a need than ever to create a long-lasting community and movement of advantage thinkers so that we can ensure young people get the best offer possible in a time when employment opportunities are sparse and harder to get into than ever for young people, and where, of course, young people have been disproportionately affected by the isolation and mental health struggles that the pandemic's created. And so we want to help grow a community made up of young people, of funders, of youth workers, of service managers, all the people that are in the room. And dare we go even deeper into social care, probation, commissioning, colleagues in the social sector that often have so many deficit-based systems that they have to navigate, and cultures that they're trying to break through. So carefully, with your help, we want to build more of a home for advantage thinking where we can unite around the strengths, talents, experience and energy of young people and of the people present. And so our vision for the future focuses around this concept of the home. So what makes a good home? Well, here are a few suggestions from me. A space to think and reflect. That might be a window ledge or a reading nook or a cozy snug. A place to explore, to be able to have fun and to be yourself at home. Good views out that provide perspective and being able to see beyond the immediate, connecting and responding to its environment, being welcoming and comfortable, and feeling like you belong and that you're safe and secure. In the same way, we want to create a home for advantage thinking that have all of these elements and more. So I just want to finish before I pass on to David to say some final words by telling you a bit more about the rooms within the Home for Advantage Thinking that we're looking to build or that we've already started to build. And so you can just see that overview there of the 4 rooms. And these form part of our strategy going forward. So the first one is around a room for youth leadership. And we've heard some great examples of that throughout this afternoon. And we want young people and the services that support them to have greater knowledge, skills and opportunity to develop a more sustainable youth leadership approach, and to collaborate with us and with others in the youth sector to create networks that can do that. So this room is about rebalancing power and providing opportunities for young people to lead the way. With support from the Listening Fund and John Ellerman Foundation, we're already starting to engage in this piece of work, gathering a group of young people to help us explore what needs to change and the best action to take. And so we want to partner with like-minded youth sector partners who have broken similar ground in other areas and who can bring their expertise to help us crack the unique challenges within youth-supported housing. So a few things we want to achieve in this room. We've already created a youth involvement strategy. You can see that on our website. And we're trying to use that to challenge ourselves and to drive youth-led change within the charity. We've also created an online platform with and for young people to help them be able to share with their peers their own skills, experiences and passion, so that we're not just relying on a top-down model of staff or old or adults teaching young people, but that young people really have opportunities to share with each other. We're going to continue to invest in young people's talents directly through our Talent Bond Fund that has been going over the last 10 years. And we're we're exploring new ways to ensure young people have better access to youth leadership resources and programs. So that's the first room. The second room has a focus on quality and impact. So I think we believe that most services want to work with young people's strengths and talents, despite the pressure from funding cuts and the focus on quick outcomes. But we often notice, and this was actually stated by someone else earlier, that there isn't a clear criteria for what effective asset-based working looks like. And therefore, we often aren't holding ourselves to account fully, or we're not able to articulate how to grow and improve. So this room is all about how we do that. It's about building capacity, increasing the quality of services so that we can all deliver an advantage thinking offer that increases positive impact for young people. Our training and accreditation work enables some of that quality conversation to happen over time and helps build that genuine relationship that is focused on the mission of those organizations. And we want to use this knowledge and experience to help influence commissioners and decision makers so that they can really understand the benefits and concrete outcomes of investing in an advantage thinking approach. And Kate from Paul Hamlin Foundation mentioned some of that, about how we explore that and how we create that evidence base. So we want to do a lot more work in that area. Andy from Your Housing Group mentioned that we're in the middle of compiling a research publication on advantage thinking. We're looking to release that around the autumn time, and we'd love to have further conversations with those that it's relevant to, and to share some of the findings from that with you guys. We're planning to develop an advantage thinking learning curriculum that gives young people more ownership over their development and provides a better impact data set that's grounded in what young people want rather than just the organization's key performance indicators. And we want to widen and develop our network of like-minded services by finding different ways to accredit and develop advantage thinking approaches with services outside of our current network. The third area, or the third room, is around influence and campaign. We want young people with experiences of disadvantage to be meaningfully involved in shaping policy decisions and the services that they interact with. So we want to put more power into young people's hands. We're not looking at building a big staff team to do a load of policy work, but instead we want to empower young people at a grassroots level to have a greater voice and impact. And we want to invest directly in their ideas and insights and build some campaigns alongside them that show the power of trusting youth. By connecting and collaborating with other youth organisations, we'd love to design and unite under that advantage thinking brand or an asset-based brand so that we can influence positive change. So we're going to continue to capture and share more stories of young people through social media and our website and other platforms. We want to collaborate with other like-minded organisations to celebrate and promote the talents and skills of young people. And we'd love to be able to build more of a campaign with young people that unites a movement of advantage thinkers. The last room is around community, a community of advantage thinkers. I think there's a tendency towards individualism in the youth sector and the housing sector. As we each try to achieve our organisation's missions, it's so easy for us to become overprotective and competitive for the limited resources that are available to sustain our organisations. However, I think we believe and we all know that true collaboration, generous leadership and building our collective strengths are critical for an advantage thinking future, both for young people and for a fair and thriving society. We have more in common with each other than we often realise, and yet it's hard to carve out that time to work together and to help each other out. So this room is all about coming together around a common desire to see young people advantaged. It's about finding ways to learn together, to challenge each other, and to do more to give young people the chance to flourish. So building on the strong connections of our member network, we want to kind of develop and grow that community. We also want to develop new communities of practice that are accessible to those that are outside of our current network offer. And we want to create a space for like-minded organizations to think, collaborate, and challenge each other around asset-based thinking. So that brings me to the end of what I wanted to share. There's lots of stuff and lots of inspiration of what has been shared, and I think there's so much still to do. There's such a bright future for advantage thinking and for services for young people and for older people as well. And we'd love to stay in touch with you guys. I did put a note on the chat earlier for those that had to leave it early, as for a link to on our website, so that you can get updated news from us. And we're looking at finding other ways that we can convene to continue the conversation. You can also download from that link a guide to the 7 tests of advantage thinking that could be helpful when you're speaking to other people around advantage thinking. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to hand over to David to say some final words, but really appreciate you being with us, and thanks for sharing.
Great. Shall I start, Joel? Yep.
Yes, please.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Thank you for that. A few things, many more than I could say, actually, because I think, as Joel just said, there's a huge amount of wisdom in some of that content. I certainly shan't repeat it all, but certainly in my last 5 minutes. I think Safina said something that was important, really important, actually, and it sounds a little bit trite, actually, but I think it's actually quite powerful. I think words are important, and the words we use. Sometimes if I'm going somewhere nice on holiday, somebody will say to me, God, I'm really jealous. I kind of feel that's kind of a disadvantaged way to think of it. And I say to them, just why don't you say you're pleased for me? And as soon as they say, I'm really pleased you're going there on holiday, it completely changes the way they feel about what they've just said. I think words can be powerful. And also I remember a few years ago, I think in this country, when we have these signs everywhere on the roads that say speed kills, which is kind of a bit of a disadvantage thing, really, in many ways, but actually a very bad way to communicate. And when I was in India, there were these great road signs up in one particular part of India that said, don't learn safety by accident. And I thought that was a really nice, powerful, fabulous way of saying the very same message, but in a far more kind of positive, advantage thinking kind of way. So I think the language is important. So thank you for reminding me of that, Safina. I think, obviously, seeing future as a young person, or seeing a young person not as a problem or a difficult challenge, but as, I think, an opportunity for fun and for learning. The other thing I was going to mention was Joel talked about being in crew, and when we chatted the other day, I didn't realise that 10 years ago or so, that when I was in crew for a foyer away day, that he had done this amazing presentation. It's this thing. It's called a talent map. Can everyone see that? I guess I've kept it with me since he did the presentation. It's the only single piece of paper that I've kept with me for all of these years, and that might sound like a silly thing. It describes life in all its fullness. It's an amazing piece of work that, when I thanked Joel for doing the other day, he said, well, it was, contribution of others, but I loved it, as I think it defines advantage thinking in so many ways. There are things like whole categories on spirituality, on bravery, on forgiveness and mercy, on appreciation of beauty and excellence. And there are 26 elements that, for me, I actually say, rather than life in all its fullness, I'd say it's all about being beautifully human, and it truly is advantage thinking. And it really defines advantage thinking for me. So, Joel, thank you very much for that. It was very helpful indeed. Some of the things I heard today that I'd probably like to repeat. I liked it when Colin talked about love. I think it's a very powerful thing. I think we should talk about it more. I heard Andy talking about advantage thinking as a way for people to take control of their lives, rather than control of their lives being taken away from them. I heard about mindset. Lisa talked about mindset and said she felt that it should be kind of built into the national curriculum. I heard in the breakout group I was in, I heard talk of how advantage thinking meant sunshine. I thought that was really really interesting. I was also really taken with what Kate was saying at Paul Hamlin I have a similar experience to her with my life. It started off in a very disadvantaged way with many deficits. But I guess that some of my talents shone through over the years, and I was able to make a better life for myself. And probably one of the reasons why I feel so passionate about advantage thinking in so many ways. The last thing, well, not the last thing, the penultimate thing I'd say was that I watched that movie a little while ago, the Apollo 11 one, about how they had to bring Apollo 11 back with all the equipment failing. And apparently in mission control was full of young people in Texas. And the average age, I just looked it up, of mission control to bring Apollo back to Earth was 28 years old. I believe that was truly advantage thinking. The people involved in all of that had to be advantage thinking, otherwise they'd never have got back. And so I think that probably is a great example of young people and advantage thinking in its fullness, actually. Then I guess to conclude, when we started talking about advantage thinking years ago, it was all about it being a movement. It was about speaking out against disadvantage thinking and uniting as a sector around proper advantage thinking. And I'd like to encourage absolutely everybody in this room to become part of this movement, to see it all the way through and to have a united and positive front that doesn't even need to talk about disadvantage thinking, but actually just defeats it because it's so obviously the right way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone. We're going to leave the Zoom on just for another 5 minutes in case you want to directly message people that you've seen and that you know and you haven't seen for a while. So Kate will just put a bit of music on, but really appreciate all your time, and we'll hopefully have further conversations. Thanks for being here.